most entrepreneurs who aren't sure give up because they think their idea or their product, whatever it is failing. But really, it's a very natural part of the growth.
What a brand, what a brand, what a brand, what a mighty good brand. Say it again now. What a brand, what a brand, what a brand, what a mighty good brand.
Brian, I can't tell you how exciting this is for me, because not only am I in pursuit of understanding the grandness of what makes a brand great and that kind of the longevity and lifetime achievement of creating a great brand, but your brand is also one that I don't even just like. I actually can't live without.
It's amazing. It's the most emotional brand that I know of.
Seriously.
Everybody has a feeling about it. And not a knowledge of it, they have a feeling about it.
A deep reverence. It's a necessity. It's a part of me. And it's so funny to say, but because it's so seasonal in Canada, my winter is defined by my UGG collection, which is actually I am a chestnut UGG. If you came to my house between December and March, you will see 11 different styles, all of the same color, because it's me.
That's funny. That's great. Yeah.
So for me, I'm just so excited to have you here. And I think it's so cool that you built this great brand that generations are obsessed with, is the wrong word, but then to go on to share your business journeys and becoming a speaker. I want to just get into everything. I don't even know where to start.
Okay.
So.
Okay, we'll start somewhere and then hit record and off we go.
Let's go. Well, Brian, why don't we start with your story? And I think that your story is a cool place to start because people know there's an Australian tie, but I think it's so much more than that.
Okay. Are we recording now?
We're recording.
Okay, way to go. Okay. Well, I never intended to be in America, I'll tell you that, 40 years ago. I had spent 10 years studying in the daytime, working in the daytime as an accountant and studying at night. And my parents pushed me into that nice, safe career. And after 10 years, I finally graduated and I quit the same day because I just hated accounting. And excuse me, it was several weeks, me driving around Perth, thinking, what am I going to do, with my life? And I was driving down the freeway one afternoon on my way home, and I heard this music on the radio, and I didn't go home. I went straight to the record store, and I bought this album, Dark Side of the Moon.
Oh, what a great album.
Because, the words of the song Time was tired of lying in the sunshine, staying home to watch the rain. You are young and life is long and there is time to kill today. And I thought, oh my God, he's talking about me. And then it went on and said, and then one day you find 10 years have got behind you. No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun. And that was like the rocket that propelled my trajectory in a different direction.
Cool.
Because I thought of all my friends who were accountants and all the other friends who'd started businesses, and I felt like I'd been running on the spot for 10 years. And around that time, I just started to learn meditation because I bought a book on yoga. That's like 45 years ago, way before it was cool.
The new thing, yoga.
Yeah. And I was meditating thinking, well, what'll I do? And then I got these goosebumps and I thought, oh my God, all the big trends are coming out of California, like Levi jeans and waterbeds and all the surf brands and skate brands and stuff. And so I thought, I'm going to go to California. I'm going to find the next big thing and bring it back to Australia. And literally within 2 or 3 weeks, I arrived in LA. I had a surfboard and suitcase, and I rented a little house in Santa Monica and rented a Dodge van, and my whole purpose for getting into LA was to go surf Malibu, which since I was a little kid, I used to see photos of that in the surf magazines. And so I started going up to Malibu every morning to surf. And was looking at billboards and looking at Wall Street Journal and the newspapers, and I was looking everywhere for the next big thing, and it went in a month, July, August, September, October, November, and then it was late November, I think, and the weather pattern had changed. It's now winter. The storms are coming in really cold and the water's chilly. And I was finishing up surfing one day with my buddy Doug, and I was pulling on my UGG boots that I'd brought from Australia, and I just got this massive dose of goosebumps again. And I thought, oh my God, there are no sheepskin boots in America.
This is
And
it.
I knew that 1 in 2 people in Australia owned some sort of sheepskin footwear. So I just looked at my buddy Doug and I said, oh man, we got to go into business, Doug. We're going to be instant millionaires, right? And, every entrepreneur listening has had that thought at some point, right? Instant millionaires. And so anyway, Doug and I went back to the house after the surfing and did a bit of research and called up a few manufacturers, and we got this Country Leather company in Western Australia to send us some samples. We had to send money down. We had to, raise $500 between us to do that. And the samples arrived, and we picked them up. And Doug went on the road to all the shoe stores, and he came back after a week, and he had about 150 business cards of every retailer that he's spoken to. And he said, Brian, they tell us we're crazy trying to sell sheepskin in California. And I knew sort of, that's sort of logical, but it's not true because Australia's climate's identical to California, right? And so we had to, when you're an entrepreneur, you hit a wall, you got to get a way around it or over it or whatever, And we thought, well, how come all my buddies up at Malibu think the Uggs are the best things in the world? And I'll go, oh my God, so many of them had been to Australia and bought half a dozen pairs back with, from their surf trips. They brought boots back. So in the surf community, it was really well known. And so Doug and I switched gears and we sort of went off to do the surf shops, right? And man, I was terrified of sales. And Doug insisted that I do all the coastal stores and he would do all the inland stores, And I remember walking in with a little bag of, samples, and I was so afraid. And the surf shop owner goes, oh, what are you doing with those? The UGG boots, they're great. All my friends have got them. And I said, well, I'm thinking of importing them into America. Oh, my God, you're going to make a fortune. Everybody I know loves those things, And so I sort of walked out of the store thinking, well, this sales isn't so bad. So went to the next store and, oh, my God, UGG boots, yeah, I'm wearing them now. Look, all my friends have got it. They're the best. You'll make a fortune. And so we did this road trip, took about, 3 or 4 days each. And we met back at my little house in Santa Monica, and we knew we were going to be instant millionaires, although it never occurred to us that we didn't ask for any orders, right? Because we didn't have any product. So what's the point, And so then we knew we needed to get product. And by a fluke, we got an instant $20,000 investment, which is in today's money about 80 grand. So we sent 15 to Australia and ordered product, and then got the 500 pair order came in mid-December, and we went out to all the retailers again. This time we had big bags full of product and order pads, and I remember going back to exactly the same first surf shop, and he says, oh, well done, Brian, but, we couldn't sell them in our store. We just sell surfboards and trunks and flip-flops, and you're going to do great in the shoe stores. And that's when the penny started to drop, that oh, my God. And this happened all the way down the coast. And the short story is that when we tallied up our first season's orders, and delivered them in the last week of December, the total was 28 pairs.
Wow.
out of 500. And that was the beginning of the reality check of the UGG business for me and Doug. So sorry I went on a bit long there, but
No, please
that's
do. Please do.
every entrepreneur. Yeah, every entrepreneur will have gone through that same phase. So I'm sure that anyone who's started their own business can identify. And the theme of it is, we've talked. You mentioned you read my book,
Sure
which is why
did.
you contacted me. It turned out to be a great book. It's like a roadmap for entrepreneurs. And the theme of the book is exactly what happened to us on that first road trip. The theme of the book is that you can't give birth to adults,
No.
right? You can't give birth to adults. Every business is conceived in somebody's head, and it's the aha, and then the first action is the birth. So me sending down for 6 pairs of samples was the birth of UGG. And then the product arrived, and then we tried to sell it, and nothing happened. It just lies there, right? Just like an infant. And you
Yep.
got to keep feeding it and changing the diapers, and every now and again you'll get a giggle out of it, but it's really a horrible stage. And this is when most entrepreneurs who aren't sure give up, because they think their idea or their product, whatever it is failing. But really, it's a very natural part of the growth. It has to be an infant. An infant can't get up and go to college, right?
Yep.
It has to be an infant. But eventually it'll start toddling, and that's when, the first true believers are, spreading stories about your product, and magazines are writing articles about you. And that pretty quickly goes into the youth, which is a great phase. You've got consistent orders and, sales working. The office is working in the warehouse, the admin is working great. And, you can run a $20, $30 million company in that youth phase. But if it's a really great product or service, like UGG was, you're going to hit the teenage years. And that's so dangerous, because do you remember as a teenager on Saturday night, you want to be in every party in town?
Yep.
Well, it's the same in business. You want to be in every mass retailer. You want to be in every major trade show. And if you're not careful, you can just strip your assets so fast by chasing all these big plans and not having the capital to back it up. But, eventually the company will mature. So that's why the birth of a brand has been such a great inspiration for so many people.
Yeah.
And it's what got me on the stage speaking. I never, ever expected to be a speaker. But everybody kept saying, "Oh, man, this book is so good. You should be on the stage telling about it." So,
But it's also because of how powerful the UGG brand was. And I think for so many in reading the book, it is shocking to hear how old the brand is. And it really
yes,
speaks to your concept of a business grows through life cycles. Like, to get from an infant to post-university, like that's 20 years. Right. And
yes,
people want to see success in a vacuum, and they forget the time that gets put into it before you can see something as a great brand.
that's right. Yeah, and a brand doesn't just happen. It's the result of a lot of work, and in my case, a result of a lot of mistakes that sort of led me to it. I didn't. I when I first arrived in America, I did go to UCLA, Graduate School of Management, and I did a couple of marketing semesters. But I didn't even have to study. I topped every class. I never studied. It was like osmosis. When I was learning all this stuff, I go, yeah, of course, that's so logical. So inside me, inside this accountant, there was a marketing person trying to get out, right?
Cool.
And I fell in love with branding. Well, I didn't know what branding was at the time, but I fell in love with the process of the sales cycle. And I'll tell you, because I want to sort of focus on branding here in this talk, I'll tell you how I screwed up for several years, right? After that first year, I sold about $6,000 worth of product out of my van in the parking lot at Malibu, right? That was my little, believe it or not, that was like a pop-up store 45 years ago, right? People would come from all over LA. Hey, they're in Santa Monica. Where'd you get those Ugg boots? Oh, there's a guy at the parking lot in Malibu, right? So I did about 6,000 in sales. But the next year I decided to advertise, and I hired, a beautiful looking girl and a guy, and posed them on the beach at Wind and Sea with the perfect hair and makeup and clothing. And the Ugg boots were like this huge part of the ad, right? Big white Uggs. And the sales that year went to like just over $10,000, and I advertised in 4 or 5 months worth of magazine. And what the hell's wrong, So the next year I got a summer job, and the next year I said, okay, I'm going to get better looking models and a more expensive photographer, right? And we posed them on the beach at Wind and Sea, and again, tall white Uggs, major part of the photo. And the sales went to about 20,000, and I couldn't understand it, And so that next season, I was working on a golf course in the summer. I just decided I'm giving up because Americans don't understand sheepskin. It's expensive. It's like just too hard to do this business. There's a whole bunch of other reasons which I list in my book, but I decided I'm just going to sell whatever product I got left in the third bedroom and then get out of it, right? And in California in October, the storm comes in from the north, and every California thinks, oh, it's winter, right? Every year they do it. And I got home from the golf course that afternoon just so totally sopping wet, and there's like 30 answering machine messages, and it's, hey, Brian, oh my God, everyone's been in the store today wanting Ugg boots. I've run out. Can I come down and pick up some more? And I'm going, oh man, I can't even go out of business properly. So I called up Australia and I ordered a whole bunch more product, and I filled out everything that I had to all the surf shops. And I knew that, okay, well, if I'm going to stay in business, I got to figure out this advertising thing. And so I had this flash to call, one of my surf shop owners, and I went down and had a beer with him, and I was explaining why, how this advertising wasn't working. And he just said, oh, shut up, Brian. And he calls out back to all these little, 12, 13-year-old grommets. And he says, what do you guys think of Uggs? And I promise you, every one of them just went, oh, those Uggs, man, they're so fake. Have you seen those ads? Those models, they can't surf. And like instantly, I realized I'm sending the wrong message to my target market. And when I looked at my ads through their eyes, I was so embarrassed at how fake these ads were, just posing models on the beach, And that was a huge wake-up call for me. And so, again, when you hit that wall, you got to figure a way around. I called a buddy up in Orange County who was running this Scholastic surf team, and I said, Pete, do you have any young kids who are going to turn pro soon, because I need to sponsor somebody. And he gave me these 2 young kids, Mike Parsons and Ted Robinson, and we just went surfing at Black's Beach in La Jolla and Trestles up in San Clemente. And both of these walks, it's a mile to get to the water, but there's always fantastic surf when you get there. And these are very recognizable walks, right? And I thought, well, maybe if I can sort of, show these photos, and I just took my own little camera and shot, walking to and from the beach and stuff. And I ended up using 2 photos from just walking along, one at Black's Beach and one at Trestles, and ran the ads. The sales went to $220,000.
Wow.
Just because I'd figured out, and what I'd hoped actually came true, is that I had this feeling that every little kid who reads Surfer magazine would just die to be on that road walking to Trestles with Mike Parsons or Black's Beach with Ted Robinson,
So
and
cool.
It created this cool factor, and that's when I first really started to understand what marketing and especially advertising is all about. You have to get the consumer. You don't ever advertise your product, right? And I'll explain that more in a second. You don't advertise your product. You advertise the feeling or the emotion or you got to imagine how the buyer will feel when they have your product, and you've got to start to push that, promote that. And I was right. Every little kid was telling their moms at Christmas, "Oh, Mom, I want a pair of UGG boots. All the cool kids at school have got UGG boots." And that was a complete reversal from the year before, where they'd be ashamed to be part of the ads that I was running beforehand. So in another way, I was using influencers 45 years ago, right?
Look at you.
So, yeah. And so these young kids, I promoted them for the next couple of seasons, and the sales just got so powerful. And everyone, if you were at, Long Beach High or, San Diego High, if you didn't have a pair of UGG boots, you were just not one of the cool people. And that was the first inklings of the fact that I had a brand, right? I didn't know what I was doing. I blundered into that, but it was a logical blunder into what became a passion for me, which is, we call it marketing now, but it embraces so many things.
And what's so cool is actually probably closer to 30 years later, if you didn't have UGG boots in my elementary school, you were also not cool. Like that's when you have a great brand, because that's been my experience with the brand since I was in the 5th or 6th grade.
Right. It's insane how long the brand has lasted, and we've kept refreshing it, the product every now and again, but the brand itself is really interesting. Shall I talk a little bit about my thoughts on branding?
I would love it. Take it away.
Okay. Well, this is like, branding in a college class, right? Your brand is not your trademark registration, right? Your brand is not your logo, right? Your brand is not your product. Your brand is what people think of you, what customers especially, and also the outside world thinks of you. And that's a very, very, in one sense, easy thing to control, but 99% of people never get it.
Yep.
Because they don't understand those elements. And when I say, what do they think of you, it's partly because they put an UGG boot on and go, "Oh my God," I've heard that so many times. "Oh my God," that's a part of it. But the other part of it is how did you make them feel when you were doing the sale, right? What was the follow-up like when you had a problem? What do their friends think about the fact that they bought a pair of UGG boots, right? All of these sort of sideshow things come to play in what a brand is. And it took a long time to learn this too, but I figured that the best part of the UGG brand was the actual tactile feeling, the touch of sheepskin on your foot, right?
It is.
And I learned this. I was at a ski show. I'd been 4 or 5 years into the business, and I was at a ski show. And even though we'd done well in surf, nobody in the ski industry took UGG seriously because it's too delicate. We have mud and slush. You get them wet. You can't. They get dirty. All these peripheral things. I went 4 days in the ski show, didn't sell a thing, right? And then on the 5th day, the last day of the show, this woman came by, and I knew she owned 12 ski shops in the New England area, right? And she was, touching the product, and the salespeople were trying to convince her, and no, we have mud, and we're from New England, and and I walked down and I said, "Excuse me, ma'am, would you mind trying this boot on?" "Oh, I don't need to try it on. I can see how fluffy they are." And I said, no, ma'am, please just take, and she was wearing Reeboks and a pair of socks, right? So I convinced her to take the socks and shoe off, and she put them on and she goes, oh my God. Oh, these are so comfortable. I could sell these in the after ski department. And like she ordered like 120 pairs, right? Which is the biggest order we'd ever had. And for one reason, she put the product on and
Experience.
tried it, right? And so from then on, I made it a rule within my company, within the sales force, that whenever you're on a sales trip, you don't ever ask for an order before the customer or the potential buyer has tried a boot on, right? And so that feel became part of the brand, because when that person would talk to another friend, they say, what are those like? Oh my God, those are so good, right? They couldn't help going off about it. And so that branding is just so many things, but it all comes back to what does the consumer feel about it and about you.
You're so right. Experience is everything, and that's why I love that book. How to build a story brand, because it's so simple, but it reminds business owners that it's not about you. It's not about what you think is interesting. That's in the details. You're seeing it from a perspective that's not in the customers. It's not going to work, and you constantly
Right.
and with social media, it kind of it clouds that even further, because you forget that every piece of social media or anything that the brand executes has to be about the customer.
That's right. Yeah, 100%.
I also wanted to ask you, Brian, you talked about all of the, the naysayers or the comments that you got like along the way. And that was a big piece for me when I was reading the book, is like how many times you were kicked in the stomach and told this is just a fad. This isn't going to last. This is going to go out of style. Like, how did you work through that? Because even when I think about it today, had I not known the business is as old as it has been, like I would suspect it, like everything goes out of style, but Uggs have never gone out of style.
Yeah. And it has resurgences. Remember how, the period when UGG was cool in the surf shops was the early 80s, and yet you didn't discover it till the 90s, right?
No,
And it
mid
went
2000s, like 2007.
2000s?
Yeah.
Oh my God. It went in pockets all over the country. And when it was sort of getting a little bit passe in California, Utah was taking off, or, Midwest was taking off, or New England was there. So it had these rebirths all over the place. And it was fun trying to keep ahead of the curve with all of these different things. And we had this mantra inside my company, because after a couple of years, like all these knockoffs started coming on the market, like every person in Australia who owned a sheepskin factory went, oh my God, America's the big market, and they'd all arrive, and I would see them at a trade show, let's say it's March, whatever year, and there'd always be people with cameras taking photos of all of my product, and I knew that they're going to come next year and they're going to have all my product copied, right? So we had this mantra in the company: let's get out front first and then run faster, right? Because you can't patent shoes, you can't patent the colors, the designs, nothing about it, right? So during that next summer, we would develop new styles with different colors and different trims and just a really completely freshened up line. And so by the next trade show, we'd have a brand new product line out, and they'd all have our last year's product out on their shelves, right? And so that was a big part of keeping the brand fresh, as you mentioned. Keeping it alive was every single year we had to come up with something that renewed the brand. And that's a huge part of keeping a brand alive, is keeping the meaning of it alive, which in our case happened to be front runners, innovative thinkers. Always, you don't want the old Uggs. You don't want, especially the knockoffs. Here's the most amazing thing about the brand that I found. And it started back with the surfer kids, right? And if, like, the moms didn't know they're sold in surf shops, right? So come Christmas, the kids are all clamoring for Uggs. So they go walking the malls, right? And most of the mall stores didn't even know what Uggs were. But for the moms who did find knockoffs in the other stores, they'd buy them and then they'd give them to the kid at Christmas Day. And the kids refused to wear them because they just called them, they're fake Uggs. And the term fake Ugg became a real thing.
Yeah.
And the moms would all come back to the surf shops going, hey, I bought these. Can I switch them out? And the surf shop going, sorry, And so it was the most amazing thing where the brand policed itself by absolutely the kids refusing to wear fake Uggs.
Well, by the brand being so strong. And I think that's another aspect too. So I've developed the 4 pillars that makes a good brand. And it's a good product, a good story, a good experience, and consistency. And go on. And what was so interesting and I use you actually in the book I'm writing is when you cut the Ugg in half because you demanded because of the American standard. Can you touch on that? Because I feel like it was such a perfect example.
That was hilarious. That was hilarious. When I bought my first pair of Uggs, the ones that I brought to America, it was in a flea market sort of up, and there was this huge pile of sheepskin boots on the floor, and I had to go through and mix and match and try and find 2 that were the same, right? Because they had different colored braids and different. And anyway, the biggest problem I had with my manufacturer, one boot would come in, the left one would be a really nice stiff skin, and the right boot would be a floppy skin, right? And I would call him up and write to him and go, George, you can't do this. She'll be right, mate. Just sell them. That's what we do in Australia. We just sell them like that, And I'm going, George, and this went on for like 2 seasons. And I couldn't get consistency. And finally, I found this perfect, pair of boots that he'd sent. And I got a pair of snips on one of them. And I went straight down the shaft, over the toe, underneath cut the sole in half and straight up the back, right? So I had 2 halves of a perfect boot. And on one, I got a Sharpie and I wrote minimum quality for the US, right? And I sent that back to George and I kept the other half. And like overnight, the quality just went straight up because it wasn't that he didn't want to do it. He just didn't understand what I was asking for.
The cultural difference of the U.S. standard.
And when he got
versus...
that half, he said, shit, I can do that all day, right? And so, like, instantly the quality went up. But the Australian mentality at retail was they'll accept anything. And we had to break that. It was a very interesting period, yeah.
But what's cool about it, so in my pursuit of figuring out the 4 pillars of what made a great brand, this was the reason why I felt we were so connected. I've devised, there's 3 levels to a brand because people use brand too broadly, right? So not all businesses have a brand. And I also found that businesses or brands, small businesses, medium-sized businesses would see a competitor as a great brand. And that comparison didn't make sense. So I've created, there's 3 levels to a brand. There's a brand, there's a good brand, and there's a great brand. And when I read your story, the transition from UGG being a brand to a good brand was the moment that you nailed consistency, which was that 4th pillar, because the product was good, the story was good. These were huge in the surfer community in Australia. The experience was good. They did what they did. They had a great experience. You put your foot in. You've never felt anything like it. But when you nailed consistency is when the brand graduated into being seen as a good brand.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And it opened up, as the quality improved, it opened it up to bigger retailers.
Becoming a great brand, which is like the last
Yes,
level.
yeah. Like I spent 5 or 6 years trying to get into the mainstream department stores. The Nordstroms and the Macy's and the big Dayton Hudson and all those. And I I didn't realize at the time that my product was sort of hokey because I hadn't really got that perfection of two boots looking the same, right? And I can remember being in, like, it took 7 years for me to get an appointment with Nordstrom, right? It was like, we don't sell those, we sell shoes, right? It was really, but I remember being in Chicago and I was at the buying office of Montgomery Ward, which was a big mall, department store, and they had one of the best shoe departments in every store all across the country. And I gave the buyer, I gave him the best sales pitch I've ever given at that time. And he just sort of sat back and goes, "Well, Brian, why are you here?" And I went, "Well, I'm trying to get an order for the California stores." And he goes, "Brian, don't you get it? We're the elephants. We don't move till the mice are running around under our feet, you know?" And I instantly knew what he was talking about. And what he meant was that until all the specialty stores in the area are just clamoring for product, the big guys aren't going to step in because they won't invest in a product. They will invest eventually in a category. And that category has to be going gangbusters before they'll take the risk. And that lifted so much pressure off me as an entrepreneur because I'd felt like I was failing and failing and failing and losing in all these big mass stores, but I wasn't. The product hadn't evolved to the point where it deserved to be in those big stores. And then I could relax. And go, "Oh shit, okay, I know how to go after." Then I went after snowboarding and skiing, and then in the Midwest, well, what the hell do the kids do there in the wintertime? And I was with a big department store guy, and he goes, "Well, hockey," and I'm
Hockey?
Australian. What the fuck what the hell is hockey? And when I did the research, I realized, oh my God, it's twice the size of surfing. And so I started advertising in Let's Play Hockey in Minnesota. It's a little kids magazine. And all the kids were telling their mom, all the cool kids at school have got a pair of UGG boots. So this thing happened over and over and over again as I could define more markets. And that was the fun of the brand building. Even though I didn't know what a brand really was at that time, that was the fun part of the business, was just opening up these markets and having people just raving about the product.
I loved the unlikely aspect of hockey being a part of UGG. That was because hockey is so big in Canada, right? So it was,
Oh, yeah.
and for me, I was like, I always knew it as a surf brand, but it was such a great twist in the story. And I also was so interested to realize how young snowboarding was. And the
Right.
story of Burton and how instrumental Burton was to the snowboarding community.
Yeah. That was so funny. I'll segue for 2 minutes and tell this
Please,
story.
yeah.
I was at helping a buddy out who was trying to get into the sport of grass skiing, right?
Crazy.
And he had these videos of the Italian, Olympic snow ski team training on the grass hills in Italy, right? And they're shoo, this brilliant video. And we had that set up at this trade show for all of the ski industry suppliers, right? And there was another kid who was, he had a little projector on the screen, and he had this video that played over and over. He had this board, like a it's a ski board, right? And you had to watch him dragging it up the hill because he didn't edit it out at all. You had to watch him drag it up the hill, and he'd put it on the flat. He'd stand on it, and he had a rope on the nose of it, and he'd go and he'd push over the edge and go shoot, 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 and then he's finished, right? And then you had to watch him drag it off the hill again. Right? And comparing the two videos, it was night and day. We were so slick and uniforms and everything, and this kid was just there all by himself. And we would walk by on our way to the cafeteria or the bathroom or something, and we would just snicker at that will never catch on. And that kid was Jake Burton, who started Burton Snowboards.
So
And,
cool.
and here we are 30, 40 years later. Where's grass skiing? Never
Nowhere. And
happened.
snowboarding is
And Jake,
huge.
yeah. And that was the beginning of Burton building his brand, That was like back in the days of me advertising on the rocks at Windansea. So, and again, you can't give birth to adults. Look at where he was in a little concrete 10 by 10 booth with no tabletop or he just, that's the root of a great product, and that's how they work.
It's a part of the journey. Like, you have to go through the shit. Like, you have to stand alone and look like an idiot and work through
Yes.
believing in your product and the concept in order to maybe achieve a brand. Right? Like a brand is
right.
not given, it's earned. And that was a really cool story. I also wanted to ask you too about, you talked a lot about the different evolutions that the UGG brand took by way of kind of almost like branding risk. What do you think the three kind of asymmetric moments were for in the UGG brand that took it to the level that it went?
Yeah. The first thing was getting the quality control right. That was huge. And that took a 4 or 5 year period to make sure I had every product looks the same. The next thing was the introduction of a rubber cup sole, which meant that people in the snow belt could look at it and go, oh my God, that sort of looks like a snow boot, right? So they didn't work any better than a regular UGG with the EVA flat sole, but the perception was that it looks more rugged and it, it'll handle the sloppy, wet conditions that we have here. So that was a big thing. And the third thing was I got really creative and played around with different colors. And so I had, things like raspberry and forest green and and so every year I tried to come out as part of that, run faster mentality, would have different colors. Now, when the buyers came around at the ski shows and the shoe shows and everything, their order form would be like 99% black or brown, right? But they'd order some of the new colors, and the new colors, we never expected it to sell much, but it made it look like, oh my God, they're going out with all these different colors. And so when we started doing that and knowing that we wouldn't hardly sell any, we started coming out with all these outrageous colors, but there were a couple like black and gray charcoal was huge. And we had this beautiful taupe color that went for many, many seasons that worked as well. So those were the three product evolutions that made the brand, seem fresh.
Cool. That's a really interesting that the color was kind of an anchor point to say like we're still cool. We still got it. We're innovating. We're doing interesting things.
Yes.
I also thought was too as you kind of went through the change and growth of the brand and new players came on, there was a lot of stress around kind of that like Rush Limbaugh decision of bringing, doing that connection. I wanted to get your perspective in retrospect. Like, do you think aligning with a polarizing figure in the end was the right thing to do?
No. All I can say is I fought that tooth and nail, but I had a board of directors that were in love with Rush Limbaugh, and they wanted to go sit at his show, and that meant, signing a $5 million deal to, switch all of our marketing to him, right? And I saw that as bad, right? I knew it wouldn't be bad sales-wise because he had such a following of blind idiots who would do whatever he said. And if he said, go buy UGG boots, like I recall this surf shop owner in Manhattan Beach in LA, he said, this grandmother came in and she said, I want to buy some UGG boots. Rush Limbaugh told me I got to buy UGG boots. And she was a grandmother and she bought like 20 pairs for her grandkids, right? Because Rush Limbaugh said, go and get them. She didn't even know what Uggs were, but she saw the sign out in front of the surf shop, right?
Hilarious.
So I knew we wouldn't suffer sales-wise, but image-wise, I'd spent years developing this really cool counterculture image. And the bottom line is that all my surf retailers were really bummed. However, they still sold more than they did the previous year, even with Rush Limbaugh. But it took me another season. Then we didn't do him the second year. And then I had to sort of buy back the loyalty of all of my, readers and viewers and owners, who owned UGG boots, who bought it as part of the counterculture. I had to sort of win them back again. And eventually we took 2 seasons and we again, by innovating with new colors and new styles, we just jumped back on top again.
But the image of it is what could have been impacted. So if it was not for kind of you going in and cleaning it up, it could have been a slow death.
Yeah, if we had done it 2 years in a row, I think we would have killed the brand completely. Yeah. Interesting.
And I also found too Oprah's role. Do you want to explain, the role of Oprah and the success of Uggs?
I'm going to preface this with a couple of examples. And it comes back to, you can't give birth to adults, right? When I started UGG, there were a couple of other companies starting at the same time. And one was importing these nylon running shoes from Japan, and they were called Blue Ribbon shoes. And it turned out that was the company that changed their name to Nike. And they'd been dinking along for 5 or 6 years in LA. Like I just noticed them in LA, advertising in running magazines and everything. And they were getting sort of nowhere. But after about 5 or 6 years, the sport of jogging took off, right? And everyone started looking, well, I need running shoes. What are, jogging shoes? These magazines, this company, Nike, they've been around for a while. So Nike got sucked into this vortex of demand from an industry that was completely outside of their control. They didn't invent jogging. It happened, and they got sucked into this vortex of demand and went into the millions and the hundreds of millions and the billions, right? There was another company there at the same time, and they'd been nearly 10 years in LA trying to get this little white kid leather shoe going. And they were trying to get into the dance market, and they were advertising in all the dance magazines across the country. And they were in the college cheerleaders and the high school cheerleading groups trying to get these little white shoes as and suddenly, completely outside of their control, the sport of aerobics takes off, right? And guess who that was? That was Reebok. And all the, aerobics people are going, well, what's the best, running, dance shoe? And Reebok. And so they got sucked into the millions and the hundreds of millions and the billions. And so with that as a backdrop, and by the way, I'll tell you one little thing. I read Shoe Dog, which was the story of Nike by Phil Knight.
Yeah.
And would you believe that the first 5 years sales of UGG was greater than the first 5 years sales of Nike?
No way.
Right? Hard to believe, but it just proves you got to go through that infancy and wait for it to happen, So fast forward, I'd been sending boots to this girl in London for like every Christmas. It was a pain in the butt. but it was Trudy Styler, who was the wife of Sting, right? And she'd have 20 different, one pair 20 times for 20 different people, and each one had to have its own customs invoice, and it was like a pain in the ass. Every Christmas I would do this. And this Christmas she called me up and goes, "Oh, Brian, look, I've just been to this seminar. It's changed my world. I need the most perfect gift. Do you have a pair of perfect size, whatever, tall sand Ugg boots? And here's where to send them. Do you have a pen?" And I go, "Yep." And she goes, "Oprah, care of Oprah Winfrey," right? And so we sent her a beautiful pair of Ugg boots, and their staff immediately came back for another 20 pairs for all of the staff. And that was the beginning of Oprah's love affair with Ugg, and it just coincided with the timing of me selling the business. The business had got so big, I was in the process of selling it to a public company, and I knew that if we announced Ugg before that sale, the demand would be so great we would just absolutely flounder not being able to deliver, because the setting up the manufacturing process for sheepskin is it's a year-long progression to get all the skins lined up and then the manufacturing. And I knew that if everyone found out about that, we'd be dead. So I was able to suppress it. And then I stayed on for a couple of seasons as a consultant to Deckers Corporation, who bought the company. And I just tried to get everything ready, because when we did finally, or Oprah announced it on Oprah's Best Picks for Christmas, and Oprah's favorite things, they had all the elves running around the show. Like, there was 24 minutes of nothing but Ugg when Oprah was at her absolute peak. And that was like Ugg's societal shift that we didn't create Oprah. It was around, and she just happened to latch onto it. And Ugg just went through that, and we got into the hundreds of millions and eventually the billions. She was very, very instrumental in us breaking into the international market.
What a cool story. Because when I think of the timing, Canada's always a bit behind. So that kind of explosion of like seeing it and then getting into like our retailers, and then by the time it hits, kids in elementary school is kind of that 4 to 5 years post when that happened.
That's
so
right.
It made sense instantly in my mind, because Oprah was everything at the time. Like, she was the TV talk show host.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, I don't know how much it would have cost in dollars for the amount of time we had with her focusing on Uggs.
But it's almost priceless. What it,
Yeah. I agree.
It transcended the brand. So now, Brian, you are an international speaker, and you've got quite a busy speaking schedule.
Yeah.
And what do you focus
I love it.
on?
It's a lot about what we talked about today. Branding is one of my favorite topics. Perseverance is a huge issue for entrepreneurs. So I address a lot of the dark days of entrepreneurialism, which everyone goes through. And I have a lot of philosophy in my books, like nearly always your most disappointing disappointments become your greatest blessings. When I ask audiences, put your hand up if in the last 6 months something happened to your business or your personal life that at the time you thought was a disaster, and now you look back and think, thank God that happened. Every time, 80% plus put their hand up, So there's things like that. The other thing is, as entrepreneurs, we're always so impatient. We're comparing ourselves to every other person in the marketplace, going, "Oh, they're doing great," and we're just thinking along, because they don't understand that all these other people have got their problems too, And so I developed this little phrase that the quickest way for a tadpole to become a frog is to live every day happily as a tadpole, and that sounds pretty trite, but there's so much power in that little piece of philosophy that if you can just focus every day on being a tadpole, before long, you look around and realize you go, wow, no tail. I got legs. And that's when you start to realize that you're actually moving. It doesn't seem like you're moving much at the time, but to live every day happily and the happily is the critical word, because if you're not happy, then get out of it and do something else. But if you can sort of dink along in your business happily every day, then that's the secret to success, because time has a way of just, manifesting things. It's incredible.
I love that. I love that. Because it's the journey. It's enjoying the journey. And
Would you believe I'm sorry to cut you off. I have just twice now I've given a new talk, and it's called It's Not the End, It's All About the Journey. So sorry to cut you off.
No, I love it. It is the journey. And that's what people like. Our concept of time is so flawed, but like to achieve greatness, like it takes time. And you got to enjoy the reps.
Yeah. And that's, I look at so many things that I look forward to finishing, like, playing rugby against an international team. I ended up playing against New Zealand All Blacks and against England.
Cool.
For Western Australia, and after it was done, I was like, is that all? And that I've always had this sort of fascination with goals just not being what looking forward, they're humongous goals, but when you achieve it, it's like, even when I sold the UGG company, it was like, God, is that all? And so I've developed a whole talk about helping entrepreneurs realize it's all about the journey. And it's, the end result's great, but it's not, when you get it, you're going to want something else. And it's a fascinating flow of, so I've given the talk twice now, and everybody both times loved it. So cool. I'm going to go out and start making that into one of my keynotes.
I love that. When looking back, what were some of the best moments that you didn't realize at the time were?
Playing golf every Wednesday morning with my warehouse manager, and catching up on stuff. Sales, as terrified as I was when I started out, I got to absolutely love sales, because I realized when I started on sales, to me, sales was getting an order, getting. And what I finally realized that these surf shops, it's like 2,000 square feet, and they're making $80,000 a year profit on my UGG boots. That's probably paying the year's rent. And I started to realize, oh my God, I'm actually a benefactor for all of these retailers. I've had people come up to me and say, oh, hey, I was a salesman at Nordstrom's. Thank you for helping me buy my house. When I realized that sales was not taking, but giving and helping and facilitating. And, I would go out, my sales day was go surfing with this surf retailer. I'd play golf with this surf shop owner. It was just like being, and that's that other part of the branding. The brand was bigger than the UGG boot. The brand became me in a lot of ways, because I traveled all over the country. I've got 1.5 million frequent flyer miles traveling with my sales reps year after year, visiting the same retailers. And so, Brian was the brand as well as the UGG boots. So, all of that was the most fun business I've ever been in. And boy, there were downtimes, there were disasters, and there was financing problems, and there was production issues, there was loyalty. I mean, I went through the gamut of every other entrepreneur, which is why I can talk so easily from the stage on all these things. But overall, with all of that disastrous shit happening, I loved every day. Not every day. I loved the days when I was having fun on the road with my customers.
What you just learned, because you don't learn from the easy stuff. You learn from the tough stuff. So even the days that weren't the most fun days, they allowed you to enjoy the other days more, because it's like when you learn.
That's right.
And like you have to learn on the journey. And it's
Yeah.
I loved how you talked about that in the book, that even that moment of like freedom where I think it was one of the retailers changed your perspective and was like, no, like like you have such a much bigger, like all I can sell is what I can sell
Yeah.
in this square footage.
Yeah. Do we have time to talk about
Yeah,
that real
yeah.
quick? Yeah. That was a momentous change in the way I looked at myself and life, because I'd be going into these surf shops and sporting goods stores, and they'd be so big and they had so much product out there, and I'm this dinky little sheepskin guy, right? And I can remember feeling so humbled and so small, and the buyers were like these huge gurus who built these big stores. And there was one in Oceanside, just up here in San Diego, and they'd just gone from a shack into this humongous big retail, you know, two-story mega store, right? And Bob was the owner, and I was surfing once, and Bob was in the water, and I paddled over to him, and I just said, "Hey, I was just in your store. My God, you guys must be making so much money. Oh, I wish I'll never be able to do that." And he sort of looked at me and he says, "Brian, you got to be kidding." He said, "I can only make as much money as there are people who walk into my store and buy something." And he said, "Look at you. You can sell to hundreds and thousands of retailers, and your market is hundreds of times bigger than mine." And and he made me realize, oh my God, I might only sell 100 pairs to him, but I can sell 100 pairs to the next guy, and 100 pairs to the next guy, and the next guy, and the next. And suddenly, like I had, Sports Chalet came in one time and said, I want 2,000 pairs. You make up the order, right? Nordstrom's came one year and said, "I've got a $7 million open to buy," right? Make up the order, right? And
Wow.
those, when I paddled over to that guy in the surf, thinking he was like the biggest, best retailer in the world, he was just a pinprick on the worldwide retail market, and that was a fabulous thing for me to sort of learn.
Realize. No, I mean I love that you shared that story. I also too, you talked throughout this conversation, I have to ask, you like refer to it as like your own pair of UGG boots. So were the boots called UGG in Australia? Is that where you got the name?
Yes, but there, no one had ever registered it as a trademark. It had been around since the 1940s, 1950s, and the product, sheepskin footwear, was generally talked of as UGG boots. But you could go into, like, every little town had its own little sheepskin manufacturer, because, the country's based on sheep. And so there'd be a little factory making bed underlays, car seat covers, sheepskin dusters, UGG boots, and they'd spell UGG UG or UGH or UGHS. And when I started in America, I first thing I did was a search. I hired a law firm, and they did a search, and UGG had never been seen in America. And so I registered UGG, and actually became a trademark. So the word UGG was descriptive in Australia, but never used as a trademark. And eventually, some guy did come in the '70s and trademarked UGHS, and he sent a letter to all the manufacturers like, "I own the mark now, you can't use it," and they all just laughed at him. So it's unenforceable in Australia, and they took it off the trademark register. So, but the rest of the world has a different law about trademarks, and
Interesting.
so internationally, it's very, very powerful.
So it's cool. It's like it had that recognition when you came to America for those who knew of the boots, but it was novel in
Yeah,
America. So you got the novelty of it. Like that's what made it so, it got the first mover
yeah,
advantage.
yeah. I think that the biggest aha, and probably one of the most important things in the whole UGG trajectory, was me realizing, when Doug got shut out at the shoe stores, was me realizing, well, why do all my friends at Malibu think this is great, right? And that was the link that connected me to the people who loved the product. And so everything sort of went back into that little rabbit hole and developed the surf market, which then eventually overflowed back into the normal markets. So that was probably one of the most crucial things that happened, was that way of thinking.
So cool. And I ask everybody that comes on this podcast, Brian, what is a brand to you? How would you define what a brand is?
There's two ways of looking at it. One is how does it make me feel, just viscerally, like there are certain brands like FedEx. I love them because I know what they do. I never eat McDonald's, but their brand is so powerful because exactly. If I went into McDonald's, I know exactly what it'd be like when I open up the paper bag. I know what it would look like, right? So a great brand gives you a comfort knowledge. It gives you a level of comfort to know, oh yeah, that bed underlay, I've used that. It's fantastic. I trust it. My friends love it. So a brand it takes away the fear of oh my God, what am I going to get? And puts it into, I know exactly what I'm getting when I order this.
Yeah, what to expect.
Does that make sense?
No, it totally did. It's a perfect answer. Have you come across Rory Sutherland?
That name rings a bell.
He's kind of like the branding guy. I'd recommend watching kind of some of his stuff on YouTube. I feel like you would geek out.
I'll write that down.
And you know what? He's also coming to Toronto next fall. So maybe I can do like a mastermind of great minds, and I can bring you down. I can get Rory there. But he talks about a brand is a lack of anxiety, which is what you're saying in a different way. It's like, because you can trust it, because you know what to expect, you therefore have no feelings of unsureness.
Okay. That is, well, that's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
That's cool.
I've got a great book. His book is great, Alchemy. I will send that to you. That'll be my gift to you.
Okay, thank you.
And Brian, so you have a book. Do you have multiple books? How do people buy into the philosophy of Brian Smith?
Yeah, the Birth of the Brand is the book. It's on Amazon, and I've also done the Audible version, so I read it myself, which was a lot of fun.
Cool.
But my main passion is helping entrepreneurs, and I do that by speaking. I do a lot for Entrepreneur Organization, YPO, a lot of big corporations that I speak to. And my biggest one was the Inc. 5000 conference a couple of years back. There was nearly 3,000 people in the audience there, all perfect entrepreneurs. So that's really my strength. But with my new talk, there's a lot of spirituality involved in that. Because I've mentioned in my earlier today the goosebumps all the time. Well, goosebumps to me is my inner spirit telling me, hey, you're on the right track, right? So I could go on for hours and hours and hours, and in my new talk, I do a lot of that. So basically, I just love helping entrepreneurs, and it's really good for me to do it from the stage because, my talks are really, really emotional and compelling,
Cool.
and the people afterwards tell me the most hilarious things about what they got out of the talk, and it's 20 people will find 20 totally different things they got out of my talk, it's really cool.
And it's
So
really fun.
that's really my passion now, is to just do as much, and the other thing is this mantra I've had since I was a teenager is I want to see as much of the planet before I die as I can. And this speaking is taking me all over the world. Like, 2 years ago it was India, Nepal,
Cool.
Egypt, Costa Rica, Philippines, and that to me is fulfilling that wish to see the planet, and as well try and do some good on the way.
That's awesome. What's left on your bucket list?
Um, I wouldn't mind a round of golf at Augusta National, but I think
Hey, okay,
that's a,
we put it
that's
in
a
the
pretty
universe.
that's a pretty tough one, you know.
That's awesome. Are you a good golfer?
I'm trying to shoot my age. Yesterday I was 2 off my age, so
Good for you when you go out every
I
day.
won't tell you what numbers that is, but any golfer will know.
Do you go golfing every day?
No, no. It's a couple of days a week.
Good for
Yeah,
you.
yeah. It's quite physically demanding. So if I'm not on the tour with a workshop and a masseuse every day, the average person couldn't do golf every day.
You're right. It is super demanding. I guess as parting remarks, Brian, before I let you go, uh, is there anything left you'd want to say? Maybe a favorite quote or something of your legacy that you want to leave with us here?
Um, well, I'll tell you the mantra that I have and I use all the time. And I found this in a book of philosophy over 20 years ago, and I typed it out and I put this piece of paper in the front of my daily planner. Every January the 1st, I take it out, the old one, and put it in the new one. And it's 4 little sentences. It's feast upon uncertainty, fatten upon disappointment, invigorate in the presence of difficulties, and enthuse over apparent defeat, right? And no matter what happens to you in your life, it doesn't matter if you're, a single mom all the way through to a CEO of a major corporation, when something bad happens in your life, those 4 statements will be able to give you the comfort to get through. Feast, fatten, invigorate, enthuse, right? They're all the front words. And you can put any disaster on the end that you like, right? But if you take the mindset of, okay, I'm going to feast upon uncertainty. Like, I don't know what's happening, but damn it, I'm going to go for it. And I have that positive mindset. What it does, it takes away the victimization of, oh, poor me. What a cruel world. Why is this happening to me? Oh, whine, 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 and it takes it from there and goes, okay, fatten upon disappointment. Okay, I can handle this. I'm getting on with my life. And so those 4 mantras, I used to, for the first 4 or 5 years, I had it on my refrigerator, right? Because they're so powerful. But now I know them like the back of my hand. And if anything goes wrong, I immediately go, like, almost, damn, that's good. Now, what's good about it? And it's amazing how fast you can flip into a positive attitude and get going with your life again.
That was awesome.
So that would be my closing statement.
Well, thank you, Brian, for your time. I really appreciate it, and I really enjoyed this conversation.